York Times opinion columnist Charles Blow writes this: in the view of many of these voters, even with his evident faults, Trump isn't so bad. And what he did in office is increasingly remembered as positive. But the threat Trump poses has not diminished. It has increased. He's more open about his plans to alter the country and our form of government if he is returned to the White House. And yet some Americans, they simply are not registering that threat as having the potential to harm in the way that it obviously can. Joining me now is New York Times opinion columnist and MSNBC political analyst Charles Blow to talk more about this. It was a really interesting piece, Charles, because you talk about how some Americans aren't necessarily registering the accomplishments of the Biden administration, and in a way they are romanticizing the 4 years with the former president. And yet the former president has repeatedly said, as you note in your piece, what he would do if he was reelected. Talk more about this and why you think we are now here.
Right. So we're talking about slivers of the electorate. Let's say that first. Right. Most people kind of are very clear about what the threat is who oppose Donald Trump. But there's some people, for whom they are kind of left out of the system, or they feel left out of the system. So whatever bad happens, they don't feel like it could get it much worse for them. And whatever the good things, they want to feel the good things immediately. So there's still a group of people who still romanticize the stimulus checks that people got, and they call them Trump checks because Trump insisted on having his name on them, even after he and Republicans had resisted actually voting for them. Democrats pushed those checks through. But they associate that with him, and it was immediate, right? This is money that came in the mail. It went into my bank account. I saw it.
Right.
And that is a different thing than an infrastructure bill. There's a bridge that we're now going to be able to build. This one is crumbling. And in 10 years from now, we'll have this bridge and there'll be jobs associated with it. By the time all that happens, the association with the Democrats and Biden getting that pushed through diminishes and distances so much that he may not even get credit for it. So it's just a disconnect in the electorate on these things.
I want to pivot while I have you, Charles. I want to talk about your documentary, which is incredibly important. It's titled South to Black Power. It's actually based off of a book that you put out just 2 years or so ago called The Devil You Know. Let's play a little bit of your documentary, and then we'll talk.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Why don't we skip over all of the pleading and the begging and the marching and the shouting and go straight to the power? During the Great Migration, about 6 million Black people left the South for cities in the North and West. I suggest that Black people return to the states with the highest percentages already of Black people, where they can gain political power.
If we're going to make a go of it, the South makes a lot of sense.
I was shaken and nervous, maybe even afraid about leaving New York for Atlanta. I've convinced myself that this is what we must do as Black people.
I think it's so fascinating, this idea. And I'm wondering, as you kind of work through this documentary, what you found when it came to what it means to reclaim that political power for Black Americans, what it could mean for the future.
Well, the topography is uneven across the South. So there's 9 states that I think would be prime kind of candidates for this, but some of them are just not. Yeah, I didn't get a sense that they were there psychologically, that they couldn't taste it. And there were some states like Georgia, where I am now, where they've tasted what Black power, what their power could mean in elections, and you see it everywhere. Like the energy around voting. And them being able to flip a state and knowing that was them that did this, like that coalition that delivered this state for Biden and that delivered 2 Democratic senators was led by Black people, right. And they know it. And even when they were, the Georgia legislature tried to suppress that voting after 2020, and Warnock had to run again in 2022, they simply overwhelmed the system and re-elected Warnock. So that is the fascinating thing, is that once people understand or get a taste and realize this is not fantastical, this is not like a dream pie in the sky thing. Like the Black population of Georgia doubled from 1990 to 2020, and that meant more people people to organize, and those people got active and those people did something. That's kind of proof of concept. That shows you and shows them. And that's the most important thing. People understand for themselves that they have a power in the state. And that is transformative psychologically as well as politically.
You also mentioned that this isn't for everybody, that you have spoken to people throughout making this documentary. If they're up in the north, you say, if they're safe, if they're thriving, this may not be for you, and that's okay. So who is this for?
This is, well, most migrations of any sort are generally undertaken by younger people anyway.
Right.
So, but this is definitely for people who don't feel safety, though people who feel like they can't get a kind of a step into wealth building in the form of being able to afford home ownership. People who feel like their educational system is not serving them because of the segregation that exists in many of these northern and western cities. You have to understand, like, Chicago is hyper segregated. New York City has the most segregated public school system in America. So there's some people in those cities that are doing incredibly well because they're wealthy or they're middle class, but there's a whole group of people who are not doing well. You know, when you look at the Black poverty rate in New York City, it's comparable to the Black poverty rate in Mississippi. And maybe you can get by with whatever the number is, $16,000 in Mississippi, but you can't in New York. So there's some people for whom it's just not serving them, right, and they don't feel safe. And I believe that you don't have to suffer through that, believing that is the only place you have to be.
By the way, the HBO original documentary film, South to Black, is now available to stream on Max. Charles Blow, thank you. Appreciate it.